everyone. I can't believe it's June already and that summer is just around the corner. But I'm ready for the warm weather nonetheless. I got a new Todd cut and I think my hair might even be shorter than Todd's right now. And since June is here, that means it's also time for the June President's Challenge. And this month's challenge is embellish, it says here. Embellish a turning with one or more techniques not limited to dye, paint, pattern, texturing, chatterwork, carving, or pyrography. Now this one's kind of difficult for me because, to be perfectly frank, I'm awful at things like carving and coloring wood. Now fortunately there's still many unexplored areas of wood turning where we can find ways to embellish work, especially in the area of multi-axis wood turning. So my idea was to take the usual embellishments like grooves and coves and beads and apply them on an axis different than the one I use to turn the work itself. So in this case I have a series of grooves on one side of the work that disappear as you rotate to the other side. As well, I tried intersecting different elements to get a different effect. But the more I experimented, the more I found that simpler was better. So what I ended up settling on was one simple off-axis element on a bowl, for instance. Now notice, even though this bead is off-axis, as I rotate the bowl around, the depth of the bead is the same around the whole piece, even though it's on a different axis. And for that to work, what has to happen is that the area that the embellishment is, in this case a bead, has to be part of a sphere, of a fairly accurate sphere. And the reason for that is, imagine this part of the bowl, this part of this ball is my bowl. So as it spins around nice and true. Now after I finish turning the outside of the bowl, if I can figure out how to rotate the bowl so that I'm essentially rotating about the center of this sphere, when the work starts turning again, it will still be true. And so now I can cut a groove or whatever embellishment I want all the way around the bowl, and it'll be all the same depth all the way around. Now even though making a complete sphere can be quite challenging, making part of a turning a sphere is actually easy with a simple jig. And for that jig I'll just need a scrap of wood left over from a spindle turning, and what I need to do is to dish out this space. So to start with, I'll true up the outside, and then I'll dish out the inside, starting out by going against the grain just to remove the material. Of course it doesn't really matter much, it's just the jig so it doesn't have to look pretty. And now I'll start from the center, but with the grain to finish it off. So now we have a perfect circle reference right there. The way this works is that I have this perfect circle around the edge of my jig, and if I hold that up to a perfect sphere, I'm going to have no gaps along the edge of my jig. Alright, so I have my bowl blank here, and I've marked the center on both sides of the blank because I'm going to be mounting it between centers for a moment. But before I do that, what I really need to do is to have two parallel lines, one on each side of the blank. So I'm going to use the same edge referenced against the square, and I'm going to draw a line right through my center. I'll use white so this is shows up a little bit better on walnut. I'm making sure if it's the same edge, I'll draw a line on this side. The accuracy of the line is not that important. The most important thing is that they're parallel. Alright, so I have my blank, my bowl blank, mounted between centers, which I usually don't do. Usually I'll mount it directly on a screw chuck to do the outside. But that hole left behind that I need to drill for the screw chuck is going to get in the way later. So what I'm going to do now, this is the top of my bowl, I'm just going to chew it up a little bit, and I'm going to put a spigot here so I can mount it into my chuck. notice I don't want to true up too far into it because I don't want to lose my white line right there. I only need about 1 inch or so at the most. Alright, so we had a bunch of prep to do, which we won't use until later. So at this point, it's just standard bowl making. The only difference being, I want to make sure that I don't lose my white line, and some part of this outside of the bowl, wherever I'm going to put the bead, has to be a sphere. So we'll get our jig ready. Alright, so I have the piece mounted between centers again. You can see from the jig that it's pretty close to spherical, not some tiny gaps, but that's too small to worry about. And what I'm going to do, I have it on the tailstock, I have it in the center. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to move it over maybe 1/4 of an inch, and I want to make sure I'm right on that white line still. And I don't want to press it in too hard yet because I want to make sure this is going to work for me. And what I want to see is that from my lowest point here, where do I end up on the other side? So right now my bead will be something about like that, but I want it to dip down a lot lower, so I'm going to move over a little bit more. Alright, you can see on the top side I'm right about 1/2 inch from the rim, and if I rotate to the other side I'm almost near the bottom. So if I move everything over a little bit and go from about here to about there, that's where my bead's going to be more or less. Now at this point what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to pivot the whole bowl around the axis, but the center of the sphere. The center of the sphere is actually way out here. So what I need to do now is adjust the headstock side so that my gap against the tool rest is consistent. So it's pretty far off right now. So that means I'm going to have to move, again staying on the white line, I need to move this axis over a little bit. And I need to keep playing with it until this space between, when the line is horizontal on either side, I need to have the same amount of space there as I do there. So right now I still got quite a bit, so I'll try to split 1/2 of it again. And you can see at this point it's pretty close. It's almost true right there. So I'm going to try to tighten it down, make sure it's still fairly true. And now when I spin it up, you can see there's no shadow at all. There's a tiny bit of a shadow. Not too bad. It has to be pretty close to true in this area right here. And now I'm ready to make my bead. First thing I'll do, I'm going to use my 3/8 spindle gouge. I'm going to try to mark about where I want to start. right about maybe about half an inch from the rim. Alright, and there's our multi-axis bead. Now, if you start making a groove and you find out that your piece is not perfectly centered, you can, because this is supposed to be close to the same sphere, you can clean it up a little bit. It's easier to fare in slightly out of true over here than it is in the groove. The groove is too obvious. Alright, and there's our multi-axis bead on the outside of the bowl. The rest is just regular bowl making. I'm going to turn around and hollow it out. The only thing I have to be careful of is that my thickness around the bead is a little bit thinner, so I can't go quite as thin as I usually do. Alright, there it is, a multi-axis bead on the outside of a bowl. I put a little bit of mineral spirits on it just to see what it's going to look like when it's finished. Still need to do a little bit of final sanding and decide what kind of finish I'm going to put on there. And I've been doing that quick because it's almost time for the beading. So that's what I have for you for this President's Challenge. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, I'm Brian Havens, and thanks for watching.